Hello, good evening. Assalamu alaikum. This is Yusuf and Hafsah, and we are going to be starting in a couple of minutes, just waiting for a few people to join. Thank you, everyone, for being with us this evening.
Yeah, and hope you enjoy our presentation. Thank you so much for joining on a Wednesday evening.
So we won't keep you for too long. We've tried to summarize as best we can our highlights and the learning points. I think we'll begin.
Okay.
So Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So I'm going to start the slideshow. So this presentation is entitled Reflections from a Volunteering Trip in East Africa from 2021. We are, for those of you who don't know us, we are Hafsah Qureshi, who is my wife over here, and she's a GP and certified life coach. I'm Yusuf, Ghumra, I'm a consultant anaesthetist, and we took along our children on this trip, Abdullah, who was 6 at the time, Abdurrahman, who was 3, and Safura, who was 6 months old. And that's our family in Addis Ababa. So a bit more about this trip. So why did we do this trip? So the main reason we went on this trip was it was a medical volunteering trip. I was finishing my anesthetic training, and I had 6 months 6 months of time available. I was offered the choice of bringing my consultant post or the time when I could apply for a consultant job 6 months earlier, or going away and doing whatever I wanted. So I chose to do a post in Ethiopia at the Black Lion Hospital. And we decided that we would take our family with us for a bit of family bonding, a bit of cultural immersion, the kind of cultural immersion that you don't really get on holidays when you go abroad for a week or two. We like new challenges. My wife and I are both of the school of thought that growth happens at the edge of your comfort zone, and so and we like being challenged, and just whatever new experiences life had for us. This was our travel timeline. So on the 7th of October, we left the UK. This was 2 months later than expected because of civil unrest in Addis Ababa, and COVID. And we were in Addis for about a month, and then on the 5th of November, we had to evacuate Addis Ababa due to the civil war that was erupting at the border of Addis Ababa. There were rebels from the north, Tigrayan rebels who actually had been ruling the country for a number of decades, but were ousted from power, were trying to overthrow the new government. So they were at the borders of Addis Ababa, and so we had to evacuate. We had a small, very short holiday in Kenya, and then we returned back to Kigali, and we departed from Kigali at the beginning of January, and we were in Ethiopia again for about a month before we came back to the UK. So where was I working? I was mainly working across 2 sites in Addis Ababa and Kigali. In Addis Ababa, I was working at a hospital called the Tikurambesa, which means the Black Lion. The Black Lion has a lot of symbolism for Ethiopians. In fact, there is like the animal, the black lion is a black-maned lion, which is found only in Ethiopia. And it's the largest government hospital in Ethiopia, and that's you can see it on the left, and on the right is the general hospital in Kigali. It was a very beautiful, well manicured, just very, very pleasant to look at. You can see like sculpted hedges and a lot of attention to detail, and so that's where I worked for those 4 months across those 2 sites. What was my this short video just shows you what Ethiopia is like on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of African Union's based there. The United Nations has had some headquarters there. There's the kind of that mixture of modernity and abject poverty that you get in a lot of developing countries. There is lots and lots of greenery, but you generally have to pay to access greenery in Addis Ababa. Lots of enterprise happening on the streets, lots of informal markets. That big building was the National Bank of Addis Ababa, where outside of which I got mugged one day and my phone was stolen. There's a memorial to Cuban-Ethiopian interaction, and this is the road up to the hospital. That's in blue is the Amharic script. It's a very, very beautiful language and beautiful script. In fact, it's a Semitic language, and it's one of the oldest languages in the world that's still spoken. And this is me going up to my department. So that's just a bit of a flavor of what Addis Ababa is like. So what did I see? I saw kind of abject resource poverty. I don't think I was prepared for what that meant. We attend these, you prepare yourself for resource poverty, but unless you've experienced it, it's hard to imagine what that might be like. This picture shows an anesthetic machine and a trolley. In the UK, that would be the equivalent of an entire room full of anesthetic equipment. So we have anesthetic rooms in the UK, cupboards full of stock and equipment, whatever you need based on the latest evidence of what equipment anesthetists should use for the anesthetic, we have available to us. Whereas in Addis Ababa, they just have a machine and drawers of miscellaneous items. I'll talk a bit more about that. The idea of personal safety was not quite what I was used to in the UK. Here are surgeons transporting patients back to the anesthetic recovery room by hand. They were just carrying the patients to recovery, whereas here we would use sliding sheets and would transfer patients with a trolley and wheel them to the recovery room to wake up from their anesthetic. Sharp spins, there were no sharp spins, so sharps were disposed of along with paper waste and other clinical waste, and cleaners wore thick leather gloves, and that was their only protection from sharps injuries. Wow. Again, things that I didn't even know that I was taking for granted were the existence of moving operating tables. In the UK, our operating tables move up and down, so surgeons don't need to hunch over, anesthetists don't need to crouch when they're doing procedures. Not available in Addis Ababa in all theatres, which meant that if you were a surgeon or an anesthetist, you often assumed postures that were harmful for your long-term musculoskeletal health. This is a trainee that I was working with, and I just took a picture of the stress on his back, and I did an assessment and showed that the chronically doing procedures like the one that you see on your left would significantly increase his risk of long-term musculoskeletal injury. And using a stool, stools are not available again very commonly in theatres. Using a stool would can go some way to reducing that risk. Monitoring vital signs. The facilities for monitoring were pretty basic. We have basic standards for monitoring in the UK set out by the Association of Anaesthetists in Great Britain and Ireland, and every single anaesthetist in the UK follows those standards. That includes monitoring how much carbon dioxide you're breathing out. In addition to that, we have oxygen on the wall in our anesthetic recovery room, but here in Addis Ababa, we didn't really see very much of that. Patients often were assessed clinically by the recovery nurses as to how much oxygen they needed or whether they needed oxygen at all. SATS monitors weren't always available. Blood pressure was not available for the youngest of patients because we didn't have blood pressure cuff sizes that small. basic equipment limitation. This is an example of what the theatres look like. So in the UK, our oxygen comes piped through the wall from a big kind of oxygen cylinder tank, which many of you will see if you're kind of walking behind the hospital. You'll see a big VIE. Whereas in Addis and other places, they just were connected to cylinders of oxygen. So when that ran out, and sometimes that ran out during a case, there'd be no oxygen until somebody went and brought another cylinder of oxygen. And that did happen once in Kigali. In terms of just basic equipment limitation, the saddest case that I came across was a little boy who came in with a foreign body. He had aspirated a foreign body, mean that he'd choked on something small, and that something small had gone into his lungs. Here in the UK, that's relatively straightforward to manage. If the patient is still alive, you anesthetize them and you go down into the lungs with a long, rigid bronchoscope, something that you can retrieve things from inside people's lungs or breathing tubes, tracheas. They didn't have the right size in Addis Ababa, so they used something that was a bit bigger, and it caused a rupture of his the right main bronchus, which is the main airway to the right lung, and they weren't able to fix that. So the child went to ICU and wasn't getting better, so they had to take him back to theatre, and this time to do major chest surgery, just to open up his chest so that they could fix the break in his lung. But they didn't have the right sort of tools to be able to put a child to sleep in that way, and unfortunately that child died. This is what we use to ventilate very small babies in Addis Ababa. Our hands. So for long cases, anesthetists would sit there doing that for many hours, up to 6 hours. Was the longest case that I did when we were there. That would be unimaginable here in the UK because we have pediatric ventilators that can ventilate small children, and this has a knock-on effect on the quality of the ventilation that you're offering a baby, because after 6 hours, you can imagine your fingers just aren't feeling it, and you're not providing the same quality breaths as you would as you were six hours ago. This is just an example of how they used the available equipment to create what we would to create the sorts of devices that we have readily available for us. So, for example, this was an attempt at making a three-way tap in an IV line. So here, when you're receiving an intravenous fluid or intravenous medication, in the middle of the line, there can sometimes be a three-way tap that you can access and inject other medications down it. Here they've created something similar using an IV cannula and two separate IV lines. Again, they have to make this from scratch and think from first principles of how they can modify the equipment for their patients. Health education. So this was a 3-year-old boy who at the time was smaller than my baby, who was 8 months old at the time. So this 3-year-old had a bit of a rocky start to life. He had a hernia. He had a congenital hernia and had been struggling with it for many years. He lived in the village and his parents didn't know how to manage it. The scars on his body were from local witch doctors who would scar his body and insert medication into those scars. This process of scarification went on for many years, and the child still survived, but was extremely malnourished by the time he came to the attention of the local the local doctor who referred him to the hospital in Kigali, and we did a pretty straightforward hernia operation on the child, and he was discharged. So what was my role? Why did I go over to East Africa? So initially it was education and training. My job was officially a visiting lecturer, so I would go and provide in-theater teaching to these anesthetists. But I found very quickly that they were very, very clever, often a lot more clever than I was. They really, really knew their stuff inside out. My day often involved me deciding what topic I was going to teach and really swatting on it before I entered theatre, and then finding out that all of the facts that I'd recently learned that morning were known by all the anesthetic trainees in that theatre already. So they were very, very clever, like extremely intelligent. They knew the theoretical management for a lot of anesthetic emergencies and common anesthetic scenarios, but their limitation was equipment. Like I said, they sometimes were unable to provide the kind of care that they knew that they should be providing for their patients because they lacked the equipment. There was a period when we arrived when a particular type of heart surgery wasn't happening because they didn't have the equipment for it. They had cardiac surgeons who knew how to do it. They had anesthetists who knew how to anesthetize for those cases. They had done those cases before, but for a few months they just didn't have the right material to put the patients on cardiac bypass. So that's where the heart stops and the blood is oxygenated through a machine so that they can operate in the heart. So things like certain types of cardiac bypass surgery was just not happening, and you can imagine that would have had an impact on patient health. This is an example of the kind of equipment that we had to use for our education and training. This was a tea trolley that I mended with a bit of gauze, but we were able to use it eventually to do a bit of bedside simulation training.
Mentioned that they only trained for 3 years compared to your
that's right.
Training,
that's right. Here there I was as an anesthetic registrar with kind of 7 or 8 years under my belt, and these anesthetists only trained for 3 years. And they were very, very clever, and their training was very intense. They were often doing 24 to 36 hour days as well. Okay, so this was the training room. This was the room that I was given to do a bit of training with the anesthetic trainees. But as you can see, it was full of boxes, and I soon found out that these boxes were aid from other countries, and I put aid in quotations because none of the equipment that was donated to this department, or the equipment that was kept in this training room, none of it was compatible with any of the equipment. Nobody really had the training to use it, and there was a sense of embarrassment or just not wanting to throw away good equipment, even though there was no real way to use it in the department. And so boxes kept piling up and taking a valuable training space. I had the idea to start cleaning up because these boxes had been there for a very, very long time indeed. We did some quality improvement projects with the trainees. This is the first time they'd had any kind of quality improvement training. And to be fair, in the UK, this is, it's pretty novel as well. Lots of anesthetic or medical trainees haven't had much formal training in quality improvement, but we were able to produce some really good work like this fishbone diagram. So that's a summary of the kind of anesthetic work that I did, and Hafsah and I were engaged in some other work in Kigali, so Hafsah will tell you more about that.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So yeah, we went out mainly for Yusuf sort of medical volunteering, but alhamdulillah, we had like lots of experiences beyond that. And one of the things we're quite privileged to witness while we're out there is engage with this palliative care charity in Rwanda called Al Amal, and it was amazing to see, mashallah, the care that is given, the palliative care by this charity. Obviously, in the UK, alhamdulillah, we don't think twice. If somebody has palliative care needs, it's all taken care of, by the NHS, the Macmillan nurses, etc. But over there, it's all, there's not so much the infrastructure from the government, so it comes in via the charity sector. And we're really, humbled to see the work of this charity. Here in the picture, you'll see like lots of food bags here, because what was unique about this charity is that not only do they look after the palliative care needs by the nurses, but what they also do is really think holistically about the patient's needs, as they're end of life. And they will provide sort of food for the patients as well, and also their families. They will think about things like providing the rent for the families, because obviously, if you can imagine, in these countries, if the main breadwinner becomes terminally ill, it's the whole family, the whole family can end up in the street. So they think about, paying the fees of the school, of the children of the patients, so they can carry on going to school. So what was fantastic to see was really that holistic care that this charity was engaging in, really thinking not only about their physical health needs, but also the worries that would be on a person's mind at the end of life. And really, also thinking about that mental health, because as we know, mental health has a huge impact on physical health as well. So yeah, for example, this chap, he was, and all these pictures of patients, by the way, are shown with the permission of the patients. They were very grateful, these patients. This young man, bless him, he had terminal cancer. But they were really looking after his whole family there, paying for the school fees for the children, providing food, providing the rent, as well as his care needs. He was very, very grateful. So yeah, it was great to see the work that this charity is doing. This lady here, she was paralyzed, but they were trying to set her up with a business so that she could still use her brain. So they're thinking, okay, she's lying in bed all day, but at least, trying to set her up with something, with an iPad, so that she can still carry on maybe doing work, contributing from her bed space. So it was great to see the work that this charity are doing. This was another medical project that we saw. So this chap, this brother we met, mashallah, it was so inspiring. This chap, his whole family were killed in the genocide of 94, his whole family. And what he's gone and done is he wants to set up a sadaqah jariyah, for his family. He wants to set up a charity for ongoing charity for his family. So what he's doing is he's building a hospital with his own money, his own savings, in rural Rwanda. So it was just so inspiring to meet someone who's gone obviously through so much trauma. And it was just kind of the lesson for me was that you look when you're affected by that kind of trauma, you can take it. It's how you take it and the lessons you learn, and he took it as a motivation now for him to carry on doing good work and trying to do some charitable acts, so that in the Islamic tradition, we believe that if you do some good works as a child, then that goes to your parents as well. The reward of that will go to your parents. So that was his intention. It was really, really inspiring to meet this chap who was setting up a medical clinic. He wasn't even medical by background, but this is the project he was setting up. And when we were there, they had a clinic set up, and they were starting to build the hospital as well. And we've kept in touch with him, and mashallah, this is where he's at now. He's sort of halfway through building his hospital. So it's just great to see great to see someone who's been through so much hardship, but he's using it to motivate, to create a legacy project for himself and his family. So that's sort of some of the medical elements of our trip, but we also wanted to use this short presentation just to highlight some of the other things, our other learning and reflections from our experience in East Africa. So just to share some other highlights with you. By the way, apologies for a noisy baby here in the background. We were hoping she'd go to sleep, but she woke up just before the presentation. So do you want to talk about this, Yusuf?
Yes. So it was incredible to see, and be present in Ethiopia. They take a lot of pride in being.
They know what that is.
They take a lot of pride in being the cradle of civilization. Does anyone in the audience know whose bones those are on the left? You can write something in the chat.
This is in Ethiopia.
So
very good.
Very good. So Radia has said Lucy. Yeah, so that's those are Lucy's bones. So Lucy was the first ever or the oldest fully standing primate. So they take a lot of pride in the fact that they were the cradle of civilization, and that record remains. And on the right is Fort Jesus, which was an important hub in East Africa for the slave trade that was engaged in by Portugal and Oman.
Yeah, one of the huge highlights for us as well was just the food out there. Is we'd never really certain foods we'd never come across before. Like this over here, this picture is of something called injera, which is a Ethiopian flatbread. And it's really like what was humbling for us is that we thought, okay, we're from the UK, we have a lot of multicultural cuisine here. We thought, oh, well traveled. So, you think, okay, most of the foods in the world. Like we didn't even know this was even a thing unless it existed, injera. And it's a very unique, apparently you only get that it's made from a unique flour called teff flour that's only really produced in Ethiopia. And it's got a unique taste to it, quite like a sour taste. Also very high in iron and very low in calories. So that was just really great to sort of just come across new foods. And what we loved as well in East Africa is like all the kind of the fresh produce and the fresh fruit and veg. We also had the opportunity to learn new skills. Like, so this is my very poor attempt here as trying to make that injera. A friend was kindly teaching me, showing me how to make it. So that's my, poor attempt. And because we were homeschooling the kids as well, we tried to, engage them in things like learning skills like cooking. Another kind of big lesson for us was, just like learning to take things slowly, something we picked up from the culture there. So, this is the batter that's used to make injera, that flatbread, and it takes about 4 days to ferment. And this is a picture of, coffee being roasted, because there, it was quite funny. Like when you go, it's just so nice to see like people aren't in a rush, like how we are in the West. So, I went to a friend's house for coffee, one of our neighbors, and she's like, do you want coffee? And I was like, yeah, sure. And like 2 hours later, this coffee is still being made, because when they say, do you want coffee? They literally take the raw coffee beans and they start roasting it in front of you. And then, they roast it in front of you slowly, and then they grind it, and they really take it slowly. And it's like they enjoy like that process of, making the coffee. So that was just really nice to see, that, for us in this kind of instant coffee culture that we're in. So that was cool to see. It was also, an opportunity to really experience new culture. So we were really blown away by Ethiopian culture. Ethiopia was never colonized. So that means that it has a very unique culture, because, even their script, as Yusuf showed it, Amharic, it's like a unique script. They have a very unique culture, even though one of the main religions is Christianity, but their version of Christianity is very kind of, is very different to kind of Catholicism and Church of England. It's actually quite similar to Islam in a lot of ways, and they have their own dresses. Their Christmas is on 7th of January, so different date. Their decorations, instead of tinsel, how they decorate at Christmas time is hay. Hay is everywhere, like in the shops. It's really interesting to see, like that difference in culture. And we got the opportunity to as I say, we got to see, like, for example, fishermen doing the fishing, and as they fish, they sing their songs and they're chanting. And this is a Rwandan ceremonial bull. These are real horns, so that was really interesting to see. Got to see the the drumming and the cultural dances and cultural singing, how this lady was singing as she was grinding some flour. Another interesting point for us was just an interesting thing to observe was Kigali's modernity. They've actually in Rwanda, they've invested quite a lot, the government, into the country, it seems, and they're really like building a lot. And this building was like a fully lit up building with different lights. It's one of the probably prettiest modern buildings I've seen. You can't really appreciate just from a photo. But that another thing about Kigali that was interesting was how green it is. Like, they have these free bikes that are available everywhere to cycle, and they're free. And they they don't allow any plastic bags at all. It's all paper bags. They're quite keen on kind of recycling and avoiding litter and looking after the planet, really. And it was also likewise interesting to see Addis Ababa is also in Ethiopia. They've invested quite a lot into their capital as well. And just to see the sky, you think a lot of people, when they think Ethiopia, they think, poverty again, from the images you see in the media. It's like any country. We definitely saw in both places, rich, poor divide. In the rich areas, a lot of built up modern buildings and parks and things, but in the poor areas, it'll be poor. Another, a real highlight for us was just seeing, like, the creativeness of the people there. Like, this child, he'd built his own scooter. We were just driving along. We saw this child who just built his own scooter. So that was just like, again, and amazing to see. Subhanallah, like, really amazing. Just happy with what they have, And, another highlight we definitely was seeing, like, Rwanda's greenery, and again, how much after the genocide in 94, I think the whole country, the impression we got is the whole country was quite scarred by what happened. And one of their mottos is like, never again, never again. So they've actually invested a lot in the country, and they've learned, for example, you can see the steps here in the hills. They've learned in the past 15 years, like, farming techniques from other countries, and they're investing a lot in the resources, building up the resources of the country, and the farming, and the output of the country as well. So that was, like, really great to see. Another highlight, of course, was seeing the wildlife. As East African wildlife is famous. Lots of, there's lots of leisure options there, but at a much cheaper price. And, alhamdulillah, one of the highlights as well is the people there are so friendly, like, so that so welcoming and friendly, really lovely people. So just to talk a little bit then, that was some of the highlights, is to share a little bit about the challenges. Obviously having to evacuate at short notice is sort of looking, but we had to just evacuate short notice and say bye to friends. So what happened is, suddenly we were told that, the prime minister is president saying that, to take up arms in the city, for the rebels that were on outskirts are advancing on Addis Ababa, and people have to take up arms. And we were like, what? We've never been in a war zone before, so we weren't really sure how worried we should be, looking out for kind of the information from the embassy. But eventually they said, the embassy said you have to evacuate. So then we had the choice to come home or go on to possibly go to Kigali. So that's why we chose to go to Kigali. It wasn't part of the original plan. And homeschooling away from family, of course, like we had to homeschool the children. It was a challenge for sure, but, you know, a good opportunity for bonding with the kids as well. But, you know, anybody will know what homeschooling while managing these two little ones was definitely a challenge for myself while Yusuf was in the hospital volunteering. So just to, again, go over some of the main learning points as well, just some of the takeaways we had, you know, reflections again from the trip as well. So one thing was that we want to mention is just the, you know, the cost influences on diet and how things are set up there. Like one of the things we noticed is that fruit and vegetables there are very, very cheap, and junk food is actually very expensive, like biscuits and crisps and things. And, you know, we were like just thinking, obviously, you know, we ate a lot more veg, and we were just like that, and meat as well is more expensive, whereas the veg is cheap. So we were like, that's actually how it should be. That, you know, fruit and vegetable is cheaper and junk food is more expensive. And, you know, you literally see, it's not just, I guess, the cost, but just the general ethic. Like people aren't as overweight there, like because their general diet is a lot more healthier.
When I first arrived at Addis Ababa, you know, as a classic Brit, you know, I went to the other anesthetic trainees and I said, where's a good place to get ice cream in Addis Ababa? And they were like, and the guy I spoke to, who's very slim, he said, I don't really eat ice cream, but I'll ask one of my fat friends and let you know. So that was their impression of ice cream, and that it was just for fat people.
Yeah, and even the kids, they just love the fresh fruit and vegetables. Another learning point for us, definitely, like something we walked away from the trip with, is a lot more gratitude, like just subhanAllah, like gratitude. I mean, this was when I was volunteering. I saw these, you know, people lining up just for drinking water. They had to like collect, they didn't have drinking water flowing in their taps. And these are things we take for total granted. So when I saw these people that lining up just to collect fresh drinking water. You know, Yusuf highlighted as well a lot of the resource poverty there in terms of the healthcare. So something, again, we want to share with you guys things to just reflect on, to be grateful for, like the free healthcare. Even with the NHS obviously under so much strain, it's still, you know, a really good service. So just wanted to share that with you guys. Even little things as well, like accessible footpaths, you know, that we have here in the UK. Something to be grateful for. And just generally the wealth and comfort, you know, like that we do have, like, you know, those of you who joined tonight, just want you to reflect on that as well. Like, you know, we were seeing the kids, you know, literally walking on the streets with no shoes. And, you know, for us, that was a big, you know, I hope as well for our children, a wake up call, because, you know, they have like, you know, dozens of pairs of shoes that they hard, you know, that they quickly grow out of, whereas their children don't even have shoes. So just want, you know, a learning point for us is really like, you know, that our life as it is now, whatever problems we have in our life, right? Whatever problems we have in our life, your life right now as it is somebody else's unattainable dream. Is somebody else's unattainable dream, like whatever. So it's, again, that was just a big thing for us, that, you know, so, and this was, for example, when I went volunteering into the patient's house, this is the houses, you know, some people don't even have the houses, you know, just mud walls like this, no plaster, no paint, no nothing, just simple mud houses. So just to reflect on that as well. Another thing for us as well, a takeaway for us was, you know, just to have humility about how much you know, like you think you know, but you don't know what you don't know, you know, stuff. So we were just humbled at our own ignorance. For example, like, you know, as I mentioned, we didn't even know of the existence of injera. This is another picture of injera. There's always more to discover. You think you know stuff, you think but there's always more to learn and discover and keep learning. Like we should aim to be lifelong learners, inshallah. Another big learning point for us was, you know, that new experiences, they bring joy to life. It's a cliche to say, but new experiences are the spice of life, you know, even within a marriage as well, you know, it can, you know, we can just get a little bit on the routine of life, and it can, you know, life can just become robotic. But, you know, when you experience new experiences, keep seeking new experiences, because it adds that richness to your life. And, you know, we probably have more memories, say, from those 4 months than like the, you know, the 9 months that we've been back now, because, you know, our life is routine. So you don't tend to remember it. Whereas when you have new experiences, you build more memories, you know, with your family as well. another big kind of reflection and learning point for us was, just do it. If you have an opportunity for, you can overthink it, like, and there can be something like this. There can be a lot of fear of the unknown, like, for us, going in COVID with a baby, a lot of people, a lot of our family, everybody, alhamdulillah, was generally supportive, but, a lot of people thought we were also crazy for going to like Ethiopia and Rwanda with a young family. And there, as I say, there were a lot of unknowns, and there were so many reasons like we could have not gone and said like, oh, it's not worth going. Fear of illness, the fear of the homeschooling, fear of, as I say, the unknown. But if you have an opportunity, don't just put your trust in in God and Allah, and just go for it, because otherwise, why, the way I like to think of it is, why would God give you the opportunity if he didn't want you to go for it? So obviously you have to weigh up things, but the main thing is, don't let fear of the unknown stop you. So yeah, those were just some of our reflections from our trip. If you have any questions, we're happy to take any questions now. Also, we've got some more pictures and things of our experiences on my Instagram page here. So, feel free to follow as well, inshallah. And that was a whistle-stop tour of our reflections. And now happy to take any questions. And as I say, apologies for the background noise. And thanks for staying with us.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Feel free to just take the mic, and or you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you. So Rahima, go ahead. And we'd love some feedback, by the way, if you found this interesting as well or not. Rahima, go ahead.
Hey, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
The kids have been watching along as well. This is like their bedtime story, so thank you. And they really enjoyed it. And they, just before you said was that the bull's horns are real, that's what they were like, wow, is that bull's horns real? So alhamdulillah, thank you for sharing your experiences. And would you do so my question to you is, would you do something like this annually?
It'd be amazing to do something like that annually if the experience came along. I think honestly though, I'll say, like, I think we learned more we gained more than we gave, in a way, if that makes sense. I think for us, this was like our first experience of this, and we definitely like to do more in the future. I think one of the things we learned is you can't just, as the West, like as people in the West, like you saw those boxes of that aid stuff just sat there, because they don't have the training. People send stuff thinking, oh, we're being helpful, but they don't have the training to use it. They don't have the resources to use those resources, if that makes sense. So rather than us just imposing that, oh, this is what we think they need, I think it's important to go there, see what the needs of people are, and then go and figure out how to support. And as Yusuf mentioned, like, the people are very intelligent, they've got great training, etc. But what they probably need support with is like coming up with the systems, the infrastructures. So we have to think, if we go out there, like, we have to think, be humble and think, like, how can we support with the systems and supporting them so that they can help themselves, or they can have the systems and infrastructure so that they can carry on, as opposed to us, because if we just go in, do a little bit of work and leave, it's not really making that much of a difference, if that makes sense. And
finally, the kids are asking, what did the kids think of the experience?
I wish they were awake to answer the question directly, but I think they really enjoyed it. I think they enjoyed it. It was good family bonding. Like I say, now when they're like, oh, we went in a pair of shoes, we're like, do you remember that little boy who didn't have shoes? So I think that's what we wanted for our children. We wanted them, they have, alhamdulillah, they have such a comfortable life here, and everything's sort of on a plate. And we wanted to see that that's not how the majority of the world lives. All of us here right now in this meeting, we're in the top 5-10% of the world, in terms of wealth, and that's not how the majority of the world lives. And we kind of wanted them to see that. You know, so yeah, I think they got that, and they also had the, you know, great experience. Again, you can see Abdullah loved the food. You know, there was lots, you know, it was just the animals they absolutely loved. So
Probably come back less fussy
people were
with
literally
what
like,
they're
why are you going to
eating as
Africa?
well.
Like, but it's such a great place, subhanallah. Yeah, such a great place.
Well, thank you
So
for
much
sharing.
rich culture, and yeah.
So just to go through some of the questions, will the presentation be made available? Yeah, so we're recording it with the intention of posting it at some point. So I think we will do that. Wasim says, thanks for this. Didn't realize the training was intense. The training was intense.
Assalamu alaikum, Hafsah.
Walaikum salam, Dr. Akmal, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good, thank you.
Alhamdulillah. I'm so happy to have listened to this, and Masha, you've come such a long way from when I first met you, just out of medical school. So you've come a long journey with your career, with your family, and just so happy to see you develop into what you are today. And mashallah, I've met your husband on Zoom now, and your kids. So, yeah, amazing experience for you all, I'm sure, and well done, and mashallah, alhamdulillah. And like you said, sometimes you get more out of these things than you actually think you're putting into them. So alhamdulillah. So I wanted to ask you, what were the eyes? Did you manage to did you get a chance to look around the hospital? What are the eye services like?
What the eye services
So
like?
I must say I didn't get a chance to see any ophthalmology, I'm afraid. I didn't actually. So all the theaters were in one complex, and I must say I didn't come across any theaters doing any eye surgery. So, and I didn't actually think about it at the time because I don't do any eye anesthesia in the UK actually. So I didn't actually, it wasn't something that crossed my mind. But now that you mention it, I didn't see any theaters doing eyes.
Yeah, but so do they have an eye clinic? And sorry, I'm on two sides. Close one. But do they have eye clinics in the hospital?
I'll be honest, I don't know. I didn't go to outpatients.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
So how was written? How amazing how you managed with 3 young children. So I just want to second and third Dr. Akmal's points about Hafsah. Like I have no idea. I have no idea how Hafsah did it when I was at work. Anyway, alhamdulillah, mashallah, she managed to do it with 3 children, and that was the reason why it was such a rich experience for me. It was you know, in being able to take the whole family, but for 8 hours a day. So Addis Ababa, although it's beautiful, it's not really safe for like, it wouldn't have been safe for Hafsah to go out on her own and just explore the city by herself. We lived in an apartment without a garden. And so Hafsah had to contend with all the children in the apartment for like 8 hours while I was away. So,
but yeah, you gotta push yourself.
Very grateful for Hafsah's support.
Like Yusuf says, growth happens at the edge of your comfort zone. So yeah, it's you know, with everything inna ma'al usri yusra, with difficulty there's ease. So if you want to have those new experiences, sometimes you have to, there is difficult. It wasn't easy for sure, like at time not being with any family, not knowing anybody, but you know, yeah, overall it was worth it. Yeah. So I would, and you guys are saying always with children, like, yeah, if you can try, I think, you know, yeah, you should, don't, like I say, fear of the unknown, you just got to take one day at a time. So don't let having children put you off doing these kinds of things, I would say. Yeah. Sufyan, you've got your hand raised.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, mashallah.
Oh, perfect. I'm standing on a balcony just trying to make sure I have a good Wi-Fi connection. As I mentioned, I'm in Dirdawa at the moment, so in Ethiopia. But I'm not here as a medic. I'm here with a friend who's an engineer. So actually, he wanted to make a point just about mud houses. Just was that actually, he says that that's actually better for your health, from a heat and from a respiratory aspect as well. He's very pro-traditional structures, and that's his angle. But I think I'm here more from a looking at the traditional education model here as well. And I think it's quite interesting to see the traditional way of doing things, and how when we do modernise things, we lose a lot of the benefit that we get from traditional models. Just trying to keep on the healthcare angle.
Sorry,
then,
Sufyan, we can't hear you very well. You're echoey a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me right now, or should I
A
try and
little bit, yeah.
move?
Yeah.
Let me twist a bit to the left and a bit to the right and see if that works.
Oh, sorry. Try again. Or maybe you'll have to type, I'm afraid. I'm really sorry, you're kind of echoey. In the meanwhile, Fussy, yeah, you've got your hand raised.
I think there's a couple of mics that are on and there might be some
I've just muted everybody. So yeah, Fussy, you can unmute yourself.
Right.
Go ahead.
So Jazakallah khair, thank you. That was amazing, guys. Really, really inspirational. I have obviously spoken to you before about this, but it was so beautiful and so nice to hear your story. Very inspirational and really particularly nice to see the pictures and kind of just relate to some of it. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cramp in my foot as I speak. I had two questions that I wanted to ask. I think first question, I think Madi has already asked in the chat, so I'll leave that for you to answer. I think that was what you've brought here from, what you've learned. The second question, I was just wondering about healthcare in Ethiopia. Is there a private system? And if so, did you have any experience and how is that resourced? Because clearly the limitation is not expertise from what you're describing, it's resource. So is there a private facility which is better resourced? Did you have an opportunity to experience that?
So I didn't get any opportunity to experience that. However, we did have we had friends in Addis who would seek private healthcare in Kenya, just because there was no kind of faith in the private healthcare in Addis Ababa either. I mean, I don't really know much more about that. I don't know what the issue was in terms of procurement. I'm like whether it was just more than a funding issue, or whether there was whether there were other issues relating to importing medical equipment. I mean, so I know, for example, that Ethiopia applies like 300% taxes on almost all so on car imports, for example. And there's a lot of heavy taxation on imported foreign goods, and I don't know whether that contributed towards the high cost of medical equipment as well. I don't know.
Shahad's written did you have the opportunity to see any maternity care and postnatal care? Not really.
So I saw kind of acute maternity care. So I was involved in emergency sections, and I saw labor suite. And again, labor suite. If you've ever been pregnant or had an epidural, you'll know that your epidural was connected to an epidural pump, and you had kind of a constant stream of local anesthetic to your epidural. They don't have things like pumps in Kigali where I was, and it was the job of a single anesthetist to go around the hospital and top up everyone's epidural and epidural pain relief every hour or so. And if that anesthetist became busy because they were dealing with an emergency, then all those women in labor would just be in pain. And in terms of postnatal care,
so that's another thing to be grateful for, things like that, that we have to things like epidural.
So that didn't exist. However, remember, postnatal care in these sorts of countries, you get excellent postnatal care
from your family
and from the village. And you go back to your village and there's 30 or 40 women who know exactly what you need in your time of need. You're not isolated. So in a way, there was a much more of a supportive environment for women after birth.
Yeah, I mean, that was another thing as well. Like, when I tell the friends I made there, about our life as women here, that we have to kind of manage the kids and then we're working and then we're doing the housework as well. They were like, well, how do you do it? That's 3 people's work, isn't it? That's 3 people's work. Because everybody there has like, home help. And I was like, yeah, it is 3 people's work. We try and do 3 people's work. And then we beat ourselves up about not being good enough and stuff, as women here in the West. And, that's why we get overwhelmed, because we're trying to do 3 people's job. And it was kind of like, why do we? It's just the way I guess things are set up here. But I guess the lesson is not to be too hard on oneself, because we are literally doing what 3 people's work, at times in the UK is, working women and, and even men as well. You have to, men help around the house too, of course, here. And again, that's not a thing there, is it? So that puts pressure on marriages and things as well. And it's just, what I'm trying to say is like, yeah, we have to learn to give ourselves a break sometimes. That, that's something I learned. Yeah, what have you changed anything in your personal lives as a result of this? Great question. So I think one impact was kind of more awareness of food, like I mentioned, like, so incorporating more veg into our diets. That should be a default. Like, like you hear of the 5 a day campaign, right? That we should try and eat 5 fruit or vegetables a day. It should be the other way around, that we should be eating fruit and vegetable as our default, and then I would say 5 of anything else, like maybe a portion of meat, a bit of rice or whatever, 5 of everything else, and then fruit and veg should be our default, rather than the other way around as it is in this culture, if that makes sense.
So in Ethiopia, they have vegan fasts twice a week, because they follow, that's what's prescribed in the Orthodox Christianity, and as a result, there's a lot of vegan food. And it was easy for us as Muslims to just have a vegan diet, because getting halal meat was very, very difficult. I mean, we could have got halal meat, but we would have had to buy a live goat from the guy outside the apartment and sorted that out ourselves. So we had a lot of vegan food, and as somebody who'd never tried a vegan diet before, like the difference in your body, like I just felt a lot more sprightly, a lot more energetic. It was incredible the effect that what we put inside our body had on how we felt and how we be.
Yeah, avoiding those processed foods, is a big thing. I think another thing I would say I took away was just gratitude and it's a cliche, I know, but like stuff doesn't bring happiness, and it's more about trying to enrich your life with experiences for yourself and your kids than buying stuff, I would say, and trying to like even on because we were doing a lot of obviously exploring while we were out there, building memories. On weekends we were exploring, and that's something we thought, even when we were back in the UK, like just try and do some new experience in the weekend with the kids as well, as a couple, to break that staleness of just the routine life, try and always seek new experiences, I think that's definitely something we've tried to incorporate more of. And also, as I say, the third thing is like that chap we met, subhanallah, like that his whole family, imagine your whole family being killed in front of your eyes. And people, if something like that happened here, like it'd be like I think a lot of people would just be like PTSD and just be like mental,
which is
obviously that's it. Just how he took that though was inspiring, and how he's made it his mission to be, is made him to be more like super. It's not sort of disabled him and crippled him, but it's motivated him to just give and be super productive and leave that legacy. I was just blown away by that, subhanallah. Any more questions? Avocado shake before DP here. Can we help financially towards the hospital?
So again, there's no real systems to help them in any kind of meaningful, sustainable way, apart from just sending people to do what I did, which was doing teaching for the trainees. In terms of equipment, I think a lot of thought needs to be put into that. I mean, I would love to start a project. So, for example, in the UK, if you're an anesthetist, you'll empathize with this, but we waste a lot of good equipment. So often, for people that aren't familiar with anesthesia, when we have an anesthetic emergency, things go downhill extremely quickly, and that's why when we're planning for an emergency, or when we're anticipating that there might be an emergency, we often open a lot of equipment that doesn't get used. We open things so that it kind of shaves off seconds in the midst of an emergency, and we waste a lot of equipment that it just gets thrown away. Whereas in Ethiopia and Rwanda, they were using and reusing single-use equipment over and over again, like breathing tubes that go into your trachea and come out sometimes covered in mucus and spit and whatever. They were just washing it in saline and using it for the next patient. That would and they would continue using that tube until the plastic broke down and they weren't able to use that again. So there is a need, but there's also a risk of sending over equipment that they just don't need, or using these countries as dumping grounds for things that we're not using here.
But did you come across any practice of traditional medicine in Ethiopia that we could learn from as such?
The answer is no, I didn't actually. And we didn't really come across anything like that, did we? I mean, so Addis Ababa is quite developed in that way. People do seek modern medical solutions for their problems.
How do people look after their mental health there?
So again, we didn't really come across this directly, but for example, I'll give you some insight into the way the trainees thought about their own work and responsibilities. There's no idea of the contribution of systems to your performance. So here in the UK, where there's a great awareness of human factors and how things can affect your performance as a doctor. The story of Hadiza Bawagaba, who was on the news a few years ago because she was involved in the death of that child, but actually she wasn't put in such an impossible situation that an accident or an error was bound to happen just because of her circumstances. They haven't really got that understanding in Addis Ababa, and in fact, the trainees still do 36-hour days. They still came to my teaching sessions, having done 24-hour on calls, busy 24-hour on calls, and they would be sitting in my teaching sessions, kind of like half asleep, and I'd say, well, you're not benefiting the class nor yourself, and you're not benefiting from the session, and I'm happy to do the session for you later. But they wouldn't, because it's just not something that they do. They don't go home early when they're tired, or like even if they're not needed, if they're scheduled to work, they'll be in. Yeah, so with regards to Rahima's question about the chap who's building a hospital, absolutely, he is looking for funding for his hospital. And if you want, he doesn't at the moment, he doesn't really have a system that we can use to help him with his funding. But yes, I am in touch with him, and we are gonna have a discussion about how we can transparently get funds from the UK and Europe to help fund his hospital, because I think that would be a really good win for everyone.
Primary care, like are they GPs? I'm not sure. The GPs in Ethiopia, or was it mainly specialists? I'm not really sure, to be honest.
I didn't really see what the
primary care.
I think the chap that used to go around with palliative care was
he was pediatrician. Yeah, there's like palliative care and things, but I don't know. Most people, I think, it's even in India, like most people are just have a speciality rather than being general physicians. So I think it's the same there, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Any other questions or? Or any takeaways? I guess that would be our question. Like, thank you so much for joining tonight. And what was your biggest takeaway from today? We can write in the chat, or
or just take the mic if you like.
Just take the mic.
I'll ever forget the image of the boy with his homemade scooter. I mean, so I just can't imagine what it must have been like to see that level of creativity, and it's so beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, so Jazakallah khair. Thank you for sharing, guys.
A pleasure, pleasure.
Thank you for coming.
All right. So, yeah, anybody else like to share, or Shad's put seek new experiences, grateful for advantages, grateful, yeah, gratitude, yeah, excellent, yeah, gratitude, reinforcing the message for children too, yeah, yeah. No, thank you so much, everybody, for joining tonight, and yeah, take care, inshallah.
Thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming.
thank
Really,
you.
really appreciate
Appreciate it.
everyone's support.
Yeah, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. And thank you for everybody's kind comments as well.